The corporate Christmas party was everything I expected it to be: overpriced champagne, forced conversations, and people pretending they actually enjoyed spending time with their co-workers. I stood near the bar at the Grand Harbor Hotel, nursing my second whiskey and watching my wife Julia work the room like she owned it. "Eddie Callahan, right?" The voice belonged to Cole Hartman, Julia's boss, and the CEO of Pinnacle Solutions. He was the kind of guy who wore $1,000 suits and acted like he invented success. "Mind if we chat for a minute?" I turned to face him, already knowing this conversation wouldn't be pleasant. Cole had that predatory smile that rich guys perfect in business school. "Sure, Cole. What's on your mind?" He stepped closer, lowering his voice just enough to make it feel intimate and threatening at the same time. "Tomorrow, Julia's coming on a weekend business trip with me to Boston. Just the two of us. You're going to be fine with that, or Monday morning you'll be looking for a new job." The hotel ballroom seemed to tilt slightly. Through the crowd, I spotted Julia watching us, her champagne glass frozen halfway to her lips. She knew exactly what Cole was saying to me. "Julia," I called out, loud enough for her to hear over the jazz quartet. "Come here for a second." She glided over in that emerald dress I'd bought her for our anniversary last year, the one she said made her feel beautiful. Now it just made me feel stupid. "Cole was just telling me about your Boston trip," I said, keeping my voice steady. "What do you think about that?" Julia looked between us, and for a moment I saw something flicker across her face. Guilt? Fear? Then it was gone, replaced by that cool composure she'd perfected over our 5 years of marriage. "I think it's a great opportunity," she said, her voice clear and confident. "Cole's right. This promotion means everything to me." "Even if it means everything to us?" I asked. She met my eyes without flinching. "I agree with Cole." Those 4 words hit me harder than any physical blow could have. I agree with Cole. Not, "I'm sorry," not, "we need to talk," not even, "it's complicated." Just cold, calculated agreement. The jazz quartet finished their song, and in the brief silence that followed, I could hear my own heartbeat. Around us, conversations continued, people laughed, glasses clinked. The world kept spinning, while mine came to a complete stop. "Excuse me," I said, setting down my whiskey. "I need to get something from my car." I walked through the hotel lobby with measured steps, past the marble columns and crystal chandeliers, past the doorman who nodded politely. Outside, the December air cut through my suit jacket, but I barely felt it. My mind was already working, calculating, planning. In my car, I opened the laptop bag I'd brought, old habit from my IT security consulting days. Inside was everything I'd spent the last 3 months gathering: printed emails, bank statements, photos, USB drives. I'd suspected something was wrong for a while now. Julia's late nights, her sudden interest in expensive clothes, the way she'd started guarding her phone like it contained state secrets. But I'd hoped I was wrong. I'd wanted to be wrong. Now I knew better. I walked back into the hotel ballroom carrying a manila envelope. The jazz quartet was setting up for another song, and Cole was holding court near the projector screen they'd used earlier for the company presentation. Julia stood beside him, laughing at something he'd said. "Excuse me," I announced, approaching the microphone. "Sorry to interrupt, but I have one more presentation for tonight." The room gradually quieted as I connected my phone to the projector system. Cole's smug expression shifted to confusion, then concern, as the first image appeared on the screen. It was a bank statement, not ours, Cole's personal account, showing regular deposits from a shell company that existed only on paper. The next slide showed the emails I'd recovered from Julia's supposedly deleted files, detailing how she'd been feeding Cole insider information about his competitors for the past 8 months. The room went completely silent. "This is interesting," I said into the microphone, my voice carrying clearly through the sound system. "But wait, there's more." The next slides showed text messages between Julia and Cole discussing their arrangement in detail. Not just the corporate espionage, but the personal side, too. Hotel receipts, restaurant bills, even a jewelry purchase from last month. The same necklace Julia had told me was a gift from her sister. Julia's face had gone pale. Cole was frantically gesturing for someone to cut the power, but the hotel staff seemed as mesmerized as everyone else. The really fascinating part, I continued, is how they plan to handle me. According to these messages, the plan was to get me fired. Then Julia would file for divorce and take half of everything while starting fresh with Cole. I clicked to the final slide, a photo of Cole and Julia in what was clearly a hotel room, taken from Julia's own phone. She'd been careless with her cloud backup settings. Unfortunately for them, I said, I'm better at technology than they thought. The silence stretched for what felt like hours, but was probably only seconds. Then the whispers started, spreading through the crowd like wildfire. I could see phones coming out, people taking photos of the screen, recording videos. Cole finally found his voice. This is fabricated. This is harassment. I'll have you arrested. With what evidence? I asked, unplugging my phone and putting it back in my pocket. Everything I just showed came from your own devices and accounts. If you want to call the police, go ahead. I'm sure they'd love to see the rest of what I found. I walked toward the exit, but stopped next to Julia. Up close, I could see her hands shaking. 5 years, I said quietly. Just for her. 5 years I thought I was married to someone real. Eddie, please, she whispered. It's not what you think. It's exactly what I think. The only thing I got wrong was how long it's been going on. I left her standing there, surrounded by her co-workers and friends, all of whom were now looking at her with a mixture of shock, disgust, and fascination. The kind of look reserved for car accidents and reality TV shows. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. Outside the hotel, I sat in my car for a few minutes, letting the adrenaline fade. My phone was already buzzing with calls and texts, but I ignored them. Tomorrow would bring consequences, lawyers, confrontations, the messy business of untangling a life I'd thought was permanent. But tonight, for the first time in months, I felt like myself again. Not the fool being played, not the husband being betrayed, but Eddie Callahan, the guy who'd built a career on finding problems and fixing them. Julia and Cole had just become my biggest problem, and I was very, very good at my job. I didn't go home that night. Instead, I drove to Frankie's bar, a dive on the south side of town where the beer was cheap and nobody asked questions. Frankie Morrison had been my friend since high school, back when we were both convinced we'd never amount to anything. He'd proven himself wrong by turning a failing neighborhood bar into the kind of place where city councilmen and construction workers could drink side by side. Well, well, Frankie said as I walked in around midnight. Don't you look like a man who's had an interesting evening? The bar was nearly empty, just a couple of regulars nursing their last drinks and a woman in the corner booth who looked like she was waiting for someone who wasn't coming. Whiskey, I said, taking a stool. The good stuff. Frankie poured 2 glasses and slid one across to me. Want to talk about it? Julia's been having an affair with her boss. Tonight I made it everyone's business instead of just mine. Frankie whistled low. Public execution, huh? How'd that feel? Like the first honest thing I've done in months. I took a sip of the whiskey, feeling it burn away some of the residual anger. But it's just the beginning. What's the plan? That was Frankie. Straight to the point, no judgment, just practical questions. It's why I'd come here instead of going home to an empty house that smelled like Julia's perfume. First, I need to secure everything. Bank accounts, credit cards, the house. She's going to try to take whatever she can before the lawyers get involved. Smart. What else? Then I'm going to make sure everyone knows exactly who they've been dealing with. Julia's built her whole reputation on being the perfect corporate wife, the woman who has it all together. Time to show people what's really underneath. Frankie refilled my glass. You sure you want to go down this road? Sometimes it's better to just walk away clean. Clean? I laughed, but there wasn't any humor in it. Frankie, she's been planning to destroy me for months. The only reason I found out is because I got suspicious and started digging. If I'd waited another few weeks, I'd be unemployed, divorced, and broke. Fair enough. What do you need from me? Information. You know everyone in this city, and everyone talks to you. I need to know what people are saying, who's on which side, what Julia and Cole are planning next. Consider it done. Frankie raised his glass. To the truth coming out. To the truth coming out, I agreed. I stayed at Frankie's until closing time, then drove to a 24-hour diner to think and plan. By 6 in the morning, I had a list of everything I needed to do, prioritized by urgency and impact. First stop, the bank. I'd been smart enough to keep separate accounts even after we got married, but we also had joint accounts for household expenses. Julia had access to about $15,000 in checking and savings. By 9 a.m., I'd transferred it all to my personal account and closed the joint accounts entirely. Next, credit cards. Julia was an authorized user on my cards, which meant she could run up debt in my name. I canceled her access to everything, then called the credit card companies to put fraud alerts on my accounts. Then, the house. We'd bought it together, but I'd put down the down payment from my savings, and the mortgage was in my name. I called a locksmith and had him meet me there at noon. Julia's car wasn't in the driveway, which meant she was either at Cole's place or still dealing with the fallout from last night. Either way, I had a few hours to work. The locksmith was a guy named Pete, who'd done security work for some of my corporate clients. He didn't ask questions when I explained I needed all the locks changed immediately. Standard rekey, or do you want something more secure? He asked. More secure. And I want a deadbolt on the garage door, too. While Pete worked, I went through the house room by room, packing Julia's clothes and personal items into boxes. I wasn't trying to be vindictive. I just wanted her stuff ready to go when she inevitably showed up demanding to get in. My phone had been buzzing all morning with calls and texts from Julia, Cole, and various co-workers who'd been at the party. I ignored all of them except one text from my cousin Lucas, who worked in cybersecurity for a firm in Boston. Saw the video someone posted on social media. Holy cow, cousin. You okay? I texted back. Better than okay. Can you help me with some digital forensics work? Absolutely. When? Today, if possible. I'll pay your usual rate. Family discount. I'll drive down this afternoon. Lucas was 26, brilliant with computers, and had a useful talent for finding information that people thought they'd hidden. If Julia and Cole had been sloppy with their digital security, and based on what I'd already found, they had been, Lucas could help me uncover everything. By 2 p.m., Pete had finished with the locks, and I'd packed most of Julia's belongings. I was loading boxes into my car when she finally showed up. She pulled into the driveway in her silver BMW, got out, and marched toward the front door like she owned the place, which legally she partly did. But possession is 9/10 of the law, and I possessed the keys. Eddie, she called out, trying her key in the lock. Eddie, what did you do? I walked over from the garage, carrying another box. Change the locks. Your stuff is in the car. She spun around, and I could see she'd been crying. Her makeup was smudged, her hair wasn't perfect for once, and she looked like she hadn't slept. You can't lock me out of my own house. Actually, I can. The mortgage is in my name. I made all the payments, and after last night, I think it's reasonable to assume you're not planning to stay married to me much longer. This is illegal. This is harassment. Call the police if you want. But I'd think carefully about that, considering what else they might find if they start investigating. Julia's face cycled through several emotions: anger, fear, calculation. I could practically see her weighing her options. Where am I supposed to go? I hear Cole has a nice place. Or there's always your sister's couch. Eddie, please, can we just talk about this like adults? We could have talked about it like adults 6 months ago before you started planning to ruin my life. Now we're way past talking. I loaded the last box into her car and handed her the keys. There's more stuff inside, but you'll need to coordinate with my lawyer to get it. I'll have someone contact you with the details. Your lawyer? Her voice cracked slightly. Eddie, you're scaring me. Good. You should be scared. You have no idea what you've started. She stood there for a moment, looking lost and vulnerable. For just a second, I remembered why I'd fallen in love with her. The way she'd looked the first time I saw her at a coffee shop near the university, reading a book and absently tucking her hair behind her ear. Then I remembered the text messages I'd seen, the ones where she'd laughed about how clueless I was, how easy it would be to handle me when the time came. Goodbye, Julia, I said, walking back toward the house. This isn't over, she called after me. I turned around at the front door, key in hand. You're absolutely right. This isn't over. It's just getting started. I went inside and locked the door behind me, leaving her standing in the driveway. Through the window, I watched her make a phone call, probably to Cole, maybe to her lawyer. Then she got in her car and drove away. The house felt different now. Quieter, but also cleaner somehow, like I'd removed something toxic from the air. My phone rang. Lucas. I'm about an hour out, he said. What exactly are we looking for? Everything, I said. Bank records, communication logs, social media activity, location data. I want to know every lie she's told, every secret she's kept, every person she's manipulated. Sounds like a fun afternoon. Should I bring coffee? Bring a lot of coffee. We're going to be here a while. After I hung up, I walked through the house one more time, noting all the places where Julia's presence had been erased. The bathroom counter where her makeup used to live, the closet where her designer clothes had hung, the nightstand where she kept the book she never seemed to finish reading. 5 years of marriage, gone in one morning. But I didn't feel sad about it. I felt liberated. Julia had made her choice when she decided to betray me. Now she was going to live with the consequences, and I was just getting warmed up. Lucas arrived at 4 p.m. with a laptop bag that looked like it could survive a nuclear explosion and enough coffee to keep us wired until next week. My cousin had inherited the family tendency toward obsessive attention to detail, but unlike me, he'd channeled it into breaking things instead of fixing them. So, he said, setting up his equipment on the dining room table, walk me through what you've already found. I showed him the emails, text messages, and financial records I'd compiled over the past few months. Lucas whistled as he scrolled through the evidence. She wasn't exactly subtle, was she? Look at this. She's using the same password for everything. Julia C. 2019, probably the year she started working at Pinnacle. Can you get into her current accounts? Already am. His fingers flew across the keyboard. She changed some passwords after last night, but she's still using variations of the same base. People never learn. Within an hour, Lucas had mapped out Julia's entire digital life. Her email accounts, social media profiles, cloud storage, banking apps, even her fitness tracker data. It was like watching an archaeologist uncover an ancient city, layer by layer. This is interesting, Lucas said, pointing to a series of calendar entries. She's been meeting with someone called MR every Tuesday for the past 2 months, always at the same coffee shop downtown. MR? Could be a lawyer, or maybe a private investigator. The meeting started right around the time she began deleting her text messages with Cole. Lucas pulled up Julia's location history, showing a detailed map of everywhere she'd been over the past 6 months. The pattern was clear. Regular trips to Cole's apartment, the downtown coffee shop, and several visits to a law office I didn't recognize. She's been planning this for a while, I said. Gets better. Look at this. Lucas opened another window showing Julia's online shopping history. She's been buying expensive stuff and having it shipped to a P.O. box. Jewelry, designer handbags, electronics, probably hiding assets. How much? Rough estimate? About $30,000 worth of stuff in the past 4 months? I felt a familiar anger building in my chest, but I pushed it down. Anger made you sloppy, and I needed to be precise. What about Cole? His digital security is even worse than hers. Want to see something funny? Lucas pulled up Cole's social media profiles. He's been posting about work trips that coincidentally match up with Julia's calendar. Look, here's a photo he posted from Boston 2 weeks ago, and here's Julia's location data showing she was in the same hotel. Can you get into his financial records? Working on it. His bank uses better security, but I found something else. Lucas opened a new window. He's been using a corporate credit card for personal expenses, restaurants, hotels, gifts. If his board of directors saw this, he'd be finished. We worked until almost midnight, building a comprehensive picture of Julia and Cole's affair and their plans for my future. By the time Lucas packed up his equipment, we had enough evidence to destroy both of their careers and probably send Cole to prison for embezzlement. What's your next move? Lucas asked as I walked him to his car. I'm going to give them a chance to come clean. Lucas laughed. You're bluffing, right? Not exactly. I'm going to offer them a choice. They can confess everything and try to minimize the damage, or I can keep digging and make everything public. And if they choose option 3, trying to destroy you first, then they'll find out why I'm good at my job. After Lucas left, I sat in the quiet house and made a list of everyone who needed to know what I'd discovered. Julia's parents, who'd always treated me like the son they never had. Her sister Monica, who'd been my friend before she was Julia's. The partners at Cole's firm, who probably had no idea their CEO was stealing from them. But first, I needed to talk to Julia directly, not to reconcile, that ship had sailed, but to give her one last chance to handle this with some dignity. I texted her. We need to talk. Tomorrow, 2 p.m., Cafe Luna downtown. Come alone. She responded within minutes. I'll be there. The next morning, I spent an hour at my lawyer's office, bringing him up to speed on everything I'd discovered. David Chen was a divorce attorney who specialized in high-conflict cases, and he'd handled the dissolution of several marriages in my social circle. This is extensive, he said, reviewing the evidence Lucas and I had compiled. Your wife and her boyfriend have been very, very stupid. What are my options? Legally, you can file for divorce on grounds of adultery, seek full ownership of the house, and probably get a judgment for the money she's hidden. Criminally, Cole's embezzlement is a felony, and Julia's involvement makes her an accessory. And if I want to handle this privately, David leaned back in his chair. That's riskier. If you try to negotiate directly and they refuse, they might destroy evidence or disappear. But if you're confident you can control the situation, I am. Then document everything. Record your conversations if it's legal, which it is in this state as long as one party consents, and be prepared to go nuclear if they don't cooperate. I left David's office feeling more confident than I had in months. For the first time since this whole mess started, I was the one with leverage. Cafe Luna was crowded when I arrived at 2 p.m., which was perfect. Julia was already there, sitting at a corner table and looking nervous. She'd dressed carefully, conservative business attire, minimal makeup, the kind of outfit designed to make her look trustworthy and vulnerable. Thank you for coming, I said, sitting down across from her. Eddie, I'm so sorry about everything. I know how this must look, but it's not what you think. It's exactly what I think. The question is what we're going to do about it. Julia's eyes filled with tears. Real ones, I thought, though with her it was hard to tell. I made a mistake, a terrible mistake, but we can fix this. We can go to counseling. We can work through it. Julia, stop. I kept my voice calm and quiet. I know about the P.O. box. I know about the $30,000 in hidden purchases. I know about your meetings with MR, who I'm guessing is either a lawyer or a private investigator you hired to help you plan my destruction. Her face went pale. How could you possibly? I'm good at finding information. It's literally what I do for a living. I leaned forward slightly. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to tell me everything, every lie, every secret, every detail of what you and Cole were planning. Then you're going to return everything you've stolen, apologize to everyone you've hurt, and we're going to end this marriage quietly. And if I don't? I pulled out my phone and showed her a screenshot of Cole's corporate credit card statements. Then I release everything I've found to your employer, his board of directors, the IRS, and anyone else who might be interested. Cole goes to prison, you lose your job and probably face criminal charges as an accessory, and both of your reputations are destroyed forever. Julia stared at the phone screen, her hands trembling slightly. You're blackmailing me. I'm offering you a choice. Take responsibility for what you've done or face the consequences of continuing to lie. She was quiet for a long moment, weighing her options. I could see the calculation in her eyes, the same cold assessment I'd witnessed at the Christmas party. Finally, she looked up at me. What exactly do you want me to do? First, you're going to call Cole and tell him this conversation is being recorded. I placed my phone on the table between us. Then you're going to explain to both of us exactly what you've been planning. Eddie, please. Those are the terms. Take them or leave them. Julia looked around the cafe, probably hoping for some kind of rescue that wasn't coming. Then she picked up her phone and dialed Cole's number. It's me, she said when he answered. I'm with Eddie. He knows everything. I could hear Cole's voice through the phone, angry and panicked. Julia held the phone away from her ear as he shouted. Cole, I said, loud enough for him to hear. This conversation is being recorded. I suggest you listen very carefully to what comes next. The shouting stopped. Now, I said to Julia. Start talking. Julia's hands shook as she held the phone, Cole's voice crackling through the speaker. The cafe buzzed with afternoon conversations around us, providing perfect cover for what was about to become the most important conversation of my marriage. Cole, just listen, Julia said into the phone. He has everything. The emails, the bank records, your corporate card statements, everything. How is that possible? Cole's voice was tight with panic. Those are private accounts. I'm very good at my job, I said, leaning closer to the phone. The same way you're apparently very bad at yours? Embezzling company funds using a corporate credit card? That's amateur hour, Cole. This is harassment. I'm calling my lawyer. Go ahead. While you're at it, call your board of directors too. I'm sure they'd love to know where their money's been going. There was silence on the other end of the line. Julia looked like she was going to be sick. What do you want? Cole finally asked. The truth. All of it, starting with when this began and ending with exactly what you two were planning to do to me. Julia took a shaky breath. It started 8 months ago. Cole was having problems with his wife, and I was unhappy. Unhappy with what? With everything. Our marriage, my job, the way my life was going. Cole made me feel important, like I mattered. So you decided to steal from him and plan to destroy me? It wasn't supposed to be like that. Julia's voice cracked. At first it was just an escape, someone who understood me. When did it become more than that? Cole's voice came through the phone. Julia, don't say anything else. We need lawyers. Cole, shut up, I said. You're already finished. The only question is whether you go down quietly or take everyone else with you. I turned back to Julia. Keep talking. 3 months ago, Cole said he was going to leave his wife. He said if we were going to be together, we needed to plan it carefully. Make sure we both came out of our divorces in good shape. So you decided to sabotage me first? We hired someone to investigate you, to see if there was anything we could use. MR, I said. Who is that? Michael Rodriguez. He's a private investigator Cole found. He was supposed to find evidence that you were having an affair, or gambling, or something we could use in divorce court. But he didn't find anything. Julia shook her head. You're boring, Eddie. You go to work, you come home, you watch Netflix. There was nothing to find. So you decided to create something. Cole's idea, she said quickly. He said we could make it look like you were abusive or that you were stealing from your clients. Just enough to make sure I got everything in the divorce. My stomach turned, but I kept my voice steady. How? Rodriguez was going to plant evidence on your computer. Make it look like you were embezzling from your consulting clients. Then I was going to file for divorce, claim you'd been emotionally abusive, and take half of everything. Including the house. Including everything. Cole said his lawyer could make sure you ended up with nothing. I sat back in my chair, letting the full scope of their betrayal sink in. They hadn't just been having an affair, they'd been planning to frame me for crimes I didn't commit and destroy my entire life in the process. Cole, I said to the phone, you still there? I'm here. Add conspiracy and attempted fraud to your list of problems. Julia just confessed to planning to frame me for embezzlement. She's lying. She's trying to save herself. Actually, she's telling the truth. I know because I found Rodriguez too. Turns out he keeps very detailed records of his work, and he's not nearly as loyal as you thought. That was a bluff, but a calculated one. If Rodriguez was real, and if he was as sleazy as he sounded, he'd probably kept records to protect himself. Cole's sharp intake of breath told me I'd guessed right. You talked to Rodriguez? Julia whispered. I talked to a lot of people. Amazing how quickly loyalty disappears when people realize they're part of a criminal conspiracy. What do you want from us? Cole asked. First, you're going to return every penny you've stolen. From the company, from me, from anyone else you've been robbing. Second, Julia's going to liquidate everything she's hidden and put it back in our joint account. Third, you're both going to resign from Pinnacle and disappear from my life forever. And if we do that, then I don't release the evidence to the police, the IRS, your board of directors, or Julia's parents. Julia flinched at the mention of her parents. You wouldn't tell them? Try me. Your father lent us $15,000 for the down payment on the house, remember? Money that came from his retirement fund. How do you think he'll feel when he finds out his daughter was planning to steal it? That money was a gift. No, it was a loan. I have the paperwork to prove it. Which means when you tried to take the house in the divorce, you would have been stealing from your own father. Julia started crying. Real tears this time, not the calculated ones she'd been using to manipulate me for months. I never meant for it to go this far, she sobbed. But it did go this far, and now you have to live with the consequences. How long do we have? Cole asked. 72 hours. Monday morning I want to see resignation letters, bank transfers, and a signed confession detailing everything you've done. If I don't get all three, everything I have goes public. Eddie, Julia said, what about us? What about our marriage? I looked at her across the table, this woman I'd loved for 5 years, who'd shared my bed and my dreams and my trust. She looked smaller now, diminished by the weight of her own choices. There is no us, Julia. There hasn't been for months. The only question now is whether you want to end this with some dignity or whether you want me to destroy you completely. I stood up and put my phone back in my pocket. 72 hours. Don't make me come looking for you. I left her sitting there, still crying, with Cole's voice buzzing through her phone like an angry insect. Outside the cafe, I took a deep breath of cold December air and felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Freedom. Not just from Julia and her lies, but from the person I'd been while I was married to her. The trusting fool who'd believed in happy endings and second chances. That version of me was gone, replaced by someone harder and smarter and much less forgiving. I had 72 hours to see if Julia and Cole would keep their word, but honestly, I hoped they wouldn't. Because if they tried to run or fight or continue lying, I was going to enjoy showing them exactly how thorough I could be when someone threatened everything I'd worked for. The game was almost over, and for the first time in months, I was winning. Monday morning came with freezing rain and the kind of gray sky that made the whole city look like a black and white photograph. I sat in my home office, coffee growing cold beside my laptop, waiting to see if Julia and Cole would honor our agreement. At 9 a.m. exactly, my email chimed. The first message was from Julia, sent from her personal account. Attached was a resignation letter addressed to Pinnacle's HR department, effective immediately. Professional, brief, citing personal reasons for her departure. No mention of affairs or embezzlement or conspiracy. The second email contained bank transfer confirmations. She'd liquidated the hidden assets, the jewelry, the designer bags, the electronics, and deposited the money into our joint account. $28,000, slightly less than Lucas had estimated, but close enough. The third email was from Cole's corporate account, which surprised me. His resignation letter was longer, more detailed, citing health concerns and a desire to spend time with family. Also attached was a bank transfer showing the return of $43,000 to Pinnacle's operating account, but there was no confession, no detailed accounting of what they'd done, no admission of guilt that I could use to protect myself if they decided to retaliate later. I was debating whether to call them when my phone rang. Unknown number. Eddie Callahan. Mr. Callahan, this is Michael Rodriguez. I believe you've been expecting my call. The private investigator Julia had mentioned. His voice was gravelly, like he'd been smoking for 40 years, with a slight accent that could have been from anywhere. I've been wondering when you'd surface. Can we meet? I have something you need to see. Where? Frankie's bar, 1 hour. Come alone. The line went silent. I stared at my phone, trying to figure out what Rodriguez's angle might be. If he was working for Cole and Julia, this could be a trap. If he was working for himself, it might be an opportunity. Either way, I needed to know what he wanted. Frankie's was almost empty when I arrived, just a couple of day drinkers nursing beers and watching morning talk shows. Rodriguez was easy to spot, mid-50s, wearing a rumpled suit that had seen better decades, sitting in the back booth with a manila folder in front of him. Mr. Callahan. He stood and shook my hand. His grip was firm, professional. Thank you for coming. What do you want, Rodriguez? To give you this. He slid the folder across the table. Everything I collected on you over the past 3 months. Photos, financial records, background checks, surveillance reports. I opened the folder and flipped through the contents. Photos of me leaving my house, going to work, meeting with clients. Bank statements showing my legitimate income and expenses. Even a psychological profile based on my social media activity and public records. Why are you giving me this? Because Cole Hartman is an idiot, and I don't work for idiots longer than I have to. Rodriguez signaled Frankie for a beer. He hired me to find dirt on you. When I told him there wasn't any, he asked me to manufacture some. And you said no. I said yes, initially. The money was good, and frankly, I didn't care about you one way or the other. Rodriguez took a sip of his beer. But then I started digging deeper into Cole's background just to protect myself. You know what I found? That he's a thief. That he's a serial thief. This isn't his first time embezzling from a company, and it's not his first time using a woman to help him do it. Rodriguez pulled out another folder, thicker than the first. Cole's been married 3 times. Each marriage ended with his wife filing for divorce, claiming abuse, and taking a substantial settlement. Each time, Cole moved to a new city and started over. He's a professional con man. Exactly, and your wife was just his latest mark. I felt a strange mixture of anger and pity. Julia had thought she was playing me, but she'd been getting played herself by someone much more experienced. What about the plan to frame me? That was real. Cole wanted me to plant evidence on your computer, make it look like you were stealing from your clients. When you filed for divorce, Julia would claim you were abusive and unstable, and Cole's lawyer would make sure she got everything. But you didn't do it. No, because 2 days before I was supposed to plant the evidence, Cole tried to stiff me on my fee, said the job was taking too long, that he was having cash flow problems. Rodriguez laughed bitterly. Cash flow problems. The man was stealing 6 figures from his own company. So you decided to switch sides. I decided to protect myself. Men like Cole always need someone to blame when things go wrong. I didn't want to be that someone. Rodriguez finished his beer and stood up. There's one more thing you should know. Cole's not done with you. He thinks you're the reason his whole scheme fell apart, and he's not the type to just walk away. What's he planning? I don't know specifically, but he's been asking questions about you, your business, your clients. He's looking for leverage. Let him look. I've got nothing to hide. Maybe. But Cole's good at creating problems where none existed before. Watch your back, Mr. Callahan. Rodriguez left money on the table and walked out, leaving me with 2 folders full of evidence and a growing sense that this wasn't over. I spent the rest of the day reviewing Rodriguez's files and cross-referencing them with what Lucas had found. The picture that emerged was even uglier than I'd imagined. Cole wasn't just a cheating husband and embezzling CEO. He was a career criminal who'd been perfecting his con for over a decade, and Julia had walked right into his trap. By evening, I'd made my decision. I called David Chen, my lawyer. I need you to file the divorce papers, I said, and I want to add a few things to our evidence file. What kind of things? The kind that will make sure Julia and Cole never try this again with anyone else. Eddie, be careful. If you're planning some kind of revenge, I'm not planning revenge. I'm planning justice. There's a difference. After I hung up with David, I called Lucas. How do you feel about doing a little more digital archaeology? I asked. What did you find? Cole's done this before. 3 times, in 3 different cities. I want to find his other victims. And then what? Then we're going to make sure everyone knows exactly who they're dealing with. Lucas arrived an hour later with his equipment and a grim expression. I've been thinking about what you said. If this guy is really a serial con artist, there might be other people he's hurt. That's what I'm counting on. We worked through the night, using Rodriguez's information to trace Cole's history. Lucas found records of his previous marriages, his former companies, even his college transcripts. By morning, we had a complete picture of Cole Hartman's criminal career. More importantly, we had contact information for his previous victims. This is incredible, Lucas said, staring at his laptop screen. He's stolen almost $500,000 over the past 15 years. And these women, they all thought they were his partners, but he was just using them. Time to make some phone calls. The first woman I called was Sarah Mitchell, Cole's second wife. She lived in Phoenix now, working as a real estate agent, trying to rebuild the life Cole had destroyed. I never thought I'd hear that name again, she said when I explained who I was. What did he do to you? The same thing he did to you, I'm guessing, but this time I caught him before he could finish. You're lucky. By the time I realized what Cole was doing, he'd emptied our bank accounts and disappeared, left me with $60,000 in debt and a reputation in ruins. Would you be willing to help me make sure he doesn't do it to anyone else? Sarah was quiet for a long moment. What do you need? Your story, and any evidence you still have. I have everything. I kept it all, hoping someday I'd get a chance to use it. By the end of the week, I'd spoken to all 3 of Cole's ex-wives and compiled a comprehensive case file documenting his pattern of fraud and manipulation. Lucas had created a digital presentation that laid out the evidence in devastating detail. It was time for Cole Hartman to face the consequences of 15 years of lies. But first, I had one more phone call to make. "Julia," I said when she answered. "We need to talk." We met in the only neutral ground left to us, my attorney's conference room, all glass and quiet, a place built for endings. Julia arrived first with a canvas tote and a stiff-backed posture that said she'd rehearsed every line on the way over. David sat beside me, pen poised, a metronome of patience. Lucas hovered by the window with his laptop bag, the unacknowledged gravity in the room. "I brought the rest," Julia said, sliding the tote across the table. Inside, the last of the jewelry, 2 unopened electronics still in their shrink wrap, a stack of documents clipped tight. "And I signed the asset transfer." David scanned, nodded. "Funds cleared." Julia's hands twisted in her lap, bare now without the rings. Are you going to tell my parents?" "I already did," I said. No venom, just a fact with a timestamp. "I owed them that much." She flinched like I'd thrown something. "Eddie, I don't need the apology," I said. "I need the truth on record." David slid a single-page statement toward her. A plain recital of fact, no adjectives, the autopsy of our marriage. Julia's breath trembled as she read. When she signed, the sound of the pen on paper was a zipper, closing a bag over something we couldn't resuscitate. "What about Cole?" she asked, eyes still on the signature. "That's the other reason we're here." The conference room door opened as if on cue. 2 men in charcoal suits entered, Pinnacle's outside counsel and the chair of their board, stern and winter pale. Behind them walked Sarah Mitchell, Cole's second wife, and, by video on the wall screen, the first and third. Rodriguez took the remaining chair with the bored dignity of a man who has seen it all and kept receipts. Papers fanned out like a magician's deck. Lucas connected his laptop and the screen filled with dates, bank routes, corporate cards that bled into hotels and jewelry, and flights billed as client outreach. Then the earlier marriages, settlements, accusations, relocations. The pattern was a spiral drawn in money and lies. "This is a courtesy preview," I told the board chair. "You'll get copies for your auditors and for law enforcement. I'm not here to negotiate. I'm here to end it." The chair's jaw set. "We'll take it from here." "Not yet," I said. "He's on his way." Julia looked at me like she was seeing the blueprint under the house for the first time. "You asked me to come here because you should watch the person you chose," I said, "when the mask comes off." Cole arrived 10 minutes late in a navy suit and a face calibrated for contrition. He froze when he saw the board and the wives. The performance cracked. The man underneath blinked, slow and reptilian, measuring exits. "Cole," the chair said. "Sit." He sat. His eyes found Julia, then me, then the folders. "This is illegal. None of this." "Spare us the hymn," Rodriguez said, dropping a digital recorder on the table. "You hired me to salt a man's life. You shorted my fee. Consider this my invoice." Lucas clicked to the next slide. Keystroke logs from Cole's home laptop, pulled from an unpatched sync service, geotagged photos that put him in the same cities, the same beds, wire trails that traced to the same 2 shell companies he'd used twice before. The room got very quiet, the kind of quiet that knows gravity is sharpening its knives. Cole tried one more card. "You think a jury will believe a jealous husband and 2 bitter exes?" He turned to Julia. "You're not going to let them do this to me." Julia stared at the table. When she spoke, her voice was small and true. "You did this to yourself." He laughed then, a short, joyless bark. "I built you. I built all of you." "No," I said. "You hollowed things out and called it architecture." David slid 2 envelopes across the table. "Mr. Hartman, this is a notice of civil complaint and a preservation letter. And this," he tapped the second, "is a criminal referral to the district attorney's office, already acknowledged." He turned to the board chair. "You'll want your own counsel to coordinate. The timeline is detailed. The subpoenas will be straightforward." Cole's jaw worked. "You're making a very big The door opened again. 2 detectives stepped in, badges up, voices even. "Mr. Hartman, we have a warrant for your arrest on suspicion of embezzlement and fraud." The board chair didn't look surprised. The chair had made a phone call before he ever sat down. Cole stood slowly, indignation rehearsed, but when the cuffs touched his wrists, it broke something practiced in him. He twisted toward Julia. "You mean nothing to me." "I was all ready," she said, barely louder than the rustle of the cuffs. "I just didn't know it." They took him out. The conference room seemed to exhale. Sarah Mitchell crossed to me and squeezed my forearm once, a small, human checkpoint. "Thank you," she said. Not a celebration. A closing of a file. The board counsel promised follow-up. Rodriguez gave a 2-finger salute and left without looking back. The screen winked dark as the other ex-wives disconnected. We were suddenly, bewilderingly normal, just 4 people and a table and the ache of what happens after. Julia stood. The tote bag looked heavier now that it held nothing. "What happens to me?" she asked me, not as a plea, but as an inquiry about the weather. "You resign," I said. "You cooperate. You find a therapist who doesn't flatter you. You tell your father you were wrong." She nodded once. "And us?" "There is no us," I said gently, "but there can be an unwar." I looked at David. He slid the second set of papers forward. The divorce petition, the agreed division, the boundary lines drawn cleanly on the map. Julia read every page. She didn't cry. When she finished, she took off the last piece of jewelry, the thin gold bracelet I'd given her in our first year, and left it on the table without being asked. Then she signed where the blue flags told her to, gathered nothing, and left. The door thunked shut. The room kept breathing. 3 months later, winter loosened its fingers. I sat at a corner table at Frankie's with a cup of coffee that didn't need to be strong to do its job. The bar door opened and closed on the same slow hinge, letting in the city's thaw. Lucas slid into the booth with a grin and a newspaper. "Front page follow-up," he said, tapping the photo. Cole in a suit 2 sizes too big for a courtroom, the headline speaking the simple language of charges and counts. The article was all auditors and discovery and a cooperator known to be assisting the state. Rodriguez, no doubt, had learned punctuality. Frankie wiped down the next table. "You look lighter," he said. "I am," I said. "I changed the locks." He snorted. "Took you long enough." My phone buzzed once, a text from an unknown number that resolved into a name in the second beat. Julia. A single line. I told my father everything. I'm paying him back. I'm sorry. I read it twice and let it settle. Not absolution. Not an invitation. Just a weather report from a country I no longer lived in. I typed back, "Good." Then, after a breath, "Take care of yourself." I put the phone face down and felt no tug to pick it up again. Outside, the streetlight clicked off as morning decided to be official. I thought about the night at the hotel, about the ballroom's hush, about the man who walked to a microphone and turned a life inside out. I didn't feel proud of that moment. I didn't regret it either. It was a tourniquet, ugly, necessary, saving something that could still be saved. "New client?" Frankie asked, nodding at the laptop still in my bag. "Yeah," I said. "Small firm, wants a real security posture, not just a compliance sticker." "Meaning they'll actually listen?" I smiled. "We'll see." He topped off my cup. "To truth coming out," he said, because some toasts don't wear out. "To truth coming out," I echoed, then added something I hadn't been able to say before. "And to what comes after." I paid the tab, stepped into a city that had color again, and walked toward the day like a man who'd finally balanced his books. The ledger was closed. The lesson wasn't complicated. Protect what matters, name what's broken, build something honest from what remains. I pulled my coat tighter and headed into the traffic, not to outrun anything, not to chase anyone, but simply because forward was the only direction left, and I had work to do.